Hello everyone, I'm Kara O'Brien. Welcome to this special edition of Destination Tomorrow. On this episode, we'll be focusing on food. Not just any type of food, but the food used in the space program. Food is obviously one of the most important factors for sustaining life here on Earth. Throughout history, its abundance has helped civilizations rise to great heights, while the lack of it has led to collapse. The abundance of food also played a major part in the role of early explorers and conquerors alike. One major problem that was faced by these groups was how to preserve the food that was brought on long journeys. Although techniques like pickling and salting helped keep some foods preserved, hunting and foraging accounted for the bulk of the food that was eaten.
For example, during the Lewis and Clark expedition, the men in the Corps of Discovery generally ate about 9 pounds of meat apiece each day. The bulk of their food came from fresh game killed along the way, rather than from food stores that were brought with them. When game was scarce, they often traded beads and trinkets with local Indian tribes for fresh meats like grizzly bear, buffalo, and when all else failed, dogs. Having large amounts of food on hand played an important role in military campaigns as well. During his reign, Napoleon Bonaparte constantly found that providing food for his soldiers was often a harder task than fighting the battles. Napoleon famously stated that an army travels on its stomach, soup makes the soldier. In fact, Napoleon was so committed to finding a way to preserve food for his soldiers that a prize of 12,000 francs was offered to the first person who could invent a method to successfully preserve food. After years of trying, a Parisian named Nicolas Appert came up with an idea that worked. Appert successfully preserved food by partially cooking it, sealing it in glass bottles with a cork, then immersing the bottle in boiling water. This process allowed the remaining air to be expelled through the boiling process, keeping the food fresh. Appert's preservation technique proved so successful that he was awarded the 12,000 franc prize by Napoleon himself in 1810. This represented the origination of the modern canning process for food. Not to be outdone, by about 1812, the British Army was preserving food in tin cans rather than in glass bottles. Tin cans were much more durable than glass and proved to be easier to store. By about 1818, the British Navy was storing over 40,000 pounds of food preserved in cans on board its ships, keeping crews well-fed and healthy. This military use eventually trickled down into everyday civilian life, helping the general public live healthier lives as well.
The preserving process became even more widespread in the late 1800s with Frenchman Louis Pasteur's work in germ theory. This theory proved that tiny living microbes caused food to spoil.
In his research, Pasteur determined he could gently heat foods and liquids to a temperature that would kill the microbes without altering the taste. Then chilling the foods and liquids would prevent any remaining microbes from multiplying. This process is now known as pasteurization.
Food preservation became even more interesting with the development of spaceflight. In order to undertake manned missions in microgravity, NASA scientists needed to understand the relationship between food and the astronaut in space. In the early days of the space program, scientists were unsure if the human body could physically even swallow food in space. The proof they were looking for came on the third Mercury flight when John Glenn consumed applesauce from an aluminum tube.
Most of the early food items packaged for space were chosen more for utility than for taste. This is because in the pressurized weightlessness of space, things like crumbs, liquids, and odors do not simply go away. They float around the spacecraft, decreasing the air quality, while also being potentially distracting. To help alleviate this problem, most food was stored in aluminum tubes that look very similar to toothpaste tubes. There were also packages of small bite-sized cubes of food that were approximately ½ an inch in size. These cubes consisted of a high-calorie mixture of proteins such as fruits and nuts, coated with an edible film to prevent crumbs. Although the meals contained the appropriate daily amount of calories, the food was not appealing to most astronauts. Often, crews would return from space having lost weight because they did not eat all of their assigned meals.